Our weekly immigration news roundup is brought to you by the law firm of Figueroa and Associates. For a consultation on any immigration or legal matter, please call 855-768-8845. That's 855-768-8845. For full stories and more immigration news, visit www.theimmigrantsjournal.com. That's www.theimmigrantsjournal.com.
Hello, my name is Mary Campbell, legal assistant at the law firm of Figueroa and Associates, and your presenter with this week's immigration news. We begin with USCIS has been processing naturalization paperwork for eligible immigrants at the fastest rate in a decade, report reveals. The Biden administration's policies addressing the detrimental effects that the pandemic and anti-immigrant agenda of the Trump administration had on immigration paperwork processing appear to be paying significant dividends. U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services has been processing naturalization paperwork for eligible immigrants at the fastest rate in a decade, the New York Times reports. At under 5 months, application processing speed is now on a par with 2013 and 2014. About 3.3 million immigrants have become citizens during President Biden's time in office, with less than 2 months to go before the close of the 2024 fiscal year. After taking office in 2021, Mr. Biden issued an executive order that sought to dial back his predecessor's hardline immigration agenda and restore faith in the legal immigration system. Among other steps, the order called for action to substantially reduce current naturalization processing times with the goal of strengthening integration of new Americans. DHS strengthens protections for immigrant workers. The Biden-Harris administration has taken hundreds of immigration actions since entering office, but one of the administration's most overlooked reforms is a process to protect immigrant workers while bolstering labor agencies' ability to hold unscrupulous employers accountable for violations. In January 2023, the administration announced a streamlined process known colloquially as DALE, Deferred Action for Labor Enforcement, for workers engaged in labor disputes to request protection against immigration enforcement from the Department of Homeland Security, DHS. In July 2024, DHS announced an expansion of the period of eligibility for protection from 2 to 4 years, recognizing that labor disputes are often not resolved within a 2-year period. The undocumented immigrants Trump wants to deport contribute millions of dollars to the economy. In an interview with ABC last Sunday, Donald Trump's running mate in the Republican presidential contest, J.D. Vance, evaded answering what the process would look like to identify and deport millions of undocumented immigrants, the central plank of their campaign, and instead recited the usual code phrases to mobilize their base: open borders, wall, criminals. Earlier this year, Trump told Time magazine that he would deport between 15 and 20 million undocumented people. But in his interview with Jonathan Karl on ABC's This Week, Vance said they would start with 1 million. In other words, Vance avoided describing the horror that would ensue going home to home, door to door to identify someone's immigration status, or conducting indiscriminate raids with the potential to detain and remove permanent residents and U.S. citizens who meet the profile of those considered undocumented. He does not describe the humanitarian catastrophe that would unleash, leaving citizen children without parents or without one of their parents, because Trump already separated babies from their parents at the border. So for him, this is normal. Or breaking families apart, because a large swath of undocumented people have been established in the United States for years. But above all, Vance does not say how the removal of even 1 million undocumented people would affect the economy of their communities, cities, states, and the nation. And that responds to the fact that the Trump-Vance team is only exploiting this issue for political and demagogic ends and avoids talking about the data that shows undocumented people help sustain and grow our economy. Meanwhile, in New York, immigrant learners struggle to find English classes as city funding lapses. That ESLL program is now suspended along with those at several other city-funded learning centers, including Queens Community House and CAMBA. That's because the City Department of Youth and Community Development earlier this year adjusted the eligibility criteria for $8.3 million in ESLL contracts to prioritize areas where the U.S. Census shows low English proficiency and high poverty rates, locking some longtime providers out of funding. City Hall, evicting more migrants, says encampments will be addressed. New York City has denied shelter to 1,660 migrants since the May rollout of a new system of time limits designed to help the city reduce the number of people living in its migrant shelters. New figures obtained by the city show. The updated numbers from the city's emergency management department come a week after the city documented a burgeoning homeless encampment outside the city-sponsored Randall's Island migrant shelter. When Mayor Eric Adams got a question about the encampment at his once-a-week open press briefing, his chief of staff, Camille Varlack, responded, saying that people barred from city shelters are still eligible to receive a city-sponsored bus ticket out to another destination in the U.S. In other news, USCIS publishes filing guide for keeping families together. On August 19, USCIS will begin accepting requests for, using a new electronic form, Form I-131F application for parole in place for certain non-citizen spouses and stepchildren of U.S. citizens. USCIS is not accepting any other form for keeping families together. Do not file a request for parole in place under this process before August 19, 2024. And finally, the Refugee Olympic Team, resilience and hope at the 2024 Paris Summer Olympics. Since their unforgettable debut at the 2016 Rio Summer Olympic Games, the Refugee Olympic Team, which represents millions of refugees and forcibly displaced people worldwide, keeps making history. This summer at the 2024 Paris Olympics, the team won its first ever medal. Sindine Gamba, a Cameroonian refugee who now lives in the UK, won the Olympic bronze medal in the women's middleweight boxing category. She is one of 37 athletes who competed on the international stage under the flag of the International Olympic Committee's IOC refugee team. The 2024 team represented the largest refugee Olympic team to date and included refugee athletes from Syria, Afghanistan, Iran, Sudan, Cuba, the Republic of Congo, South Sudan, Cameroon, Ethiopia, and Eritrea. A confluence of war, human rights violations, persecution, and violence led to the tragic realities of forced displacement that shaped the lives of each of these athletes who transformed their hardships into triumphs for the entire world to see. Thank you.
Our weekly immigration news roundup is brought to you by the law firm of Figueroa & Associates. For a consultation on any immigration or legal matter, please call 855-768-8845. That's 855-768-8845. For full stories and more immigration news, visit www.theimmigrantsjournal.com. That's www.theimmigrantsjournal.com.